The silence is broken not by a shriek, but by the relentless, percussive sound of wind, a low, rhythmic pulse that undercuts the panic. A metal cage, rusting and unstable, hangs suspended above a fog-choked canyon, a claustrophobic cage against the infinite expanse of a forgotten sky. Then they appear, not gliding majestically, but lunging with a manic, almost desperate hostility. The cinematic Pteranodon of Jurassic Park III is one of the most effective and visceral monsters in the entire franchise, abandoning the role of background scenery to become a focused, aerial executioner. Our investigation begins with a critical question. How did this apex of fear, this breathtaking cinematic illusion, ever take flight? And what does the fossil record say about the actual temperament and capabilities of the magnificent creature we call Pteranodon? Now, let's roll the film, open the fossil record, and begin our investigation. The scene's genius lies in its reversal of expectations. On the ground, the characters are exposed. In the air, they are trapped. The creatures circle, not with the calculating patience of an eagle, but with the immediate, visceral malice of a demon. The camera work emphasizes the sickening speed and the close quarters terror. A wing slams into the cage wall, rattling the structure. A razor-thin beak snaps inches from flesh. This is not the measured attack of a predator, concerned with energy expenditure or risk assessment. It is raw, persistent aggression. The Pteranodon is portrayed here as a relentless, untiring engine of violence, driven apparently not by hunger alone, but by a territorial fury that demands the elimination of intruders. As cinematic narrators, we recognize the narrative function of this moment: to raise the stakes, to introduce a novel threat, and to push the boundaries of dinosaur action far above the rainforest canopy. The pop culture myth generated by this scene is potent and enduring. That Pteranodon was a kind of vicious sky raptor, capable of seizing large prey, engaging in ground combat, and exhibiting a near-human level of focused, territorial hostility. It is a terrifying spectacle, perfectly scored and paced, which successfully grafts the ferocity of a terrestrial theropod onto the silent, vast medium of the air. But as investigative scholars, the terror on screen is quickly replaced by a fascinating dissonance when we turn to the hard evidence of paleontology. The cinematic creature's behavior fundamentally clashes with its biological imperatives. We must begin our deconstruction not with flight or size, but with the weapon of choice, the jaw structure. When we examine the actual fossils, the holotype of Pteranodon, a profound structural specialization comes into focus. The scientific anchor of Pteranodon beak structure and wear patterns tells a story far removed from the violent, crushing attacks depicted on screen. The jaws of Pteranodon are long, slender, and entirely toothless, a critical distinction from the dentition-equipped pterodactylus or other Mesozoic flyers. These jaws form a large, delicate fish trap, ending in a sharp but fragile point. They are built for speed and precision in capturing slippery, aquatic prey, like fish or possibly cephalopods, which would be snatched from the water's surface in a swift, shallow dip. The wear patterns on fossilized jaw tips support this aquatic, specialized diet. We do not find the kind of heavy-duty lateral abrasion or stress fractures one would expect from an animal that routinely grappled with struggling, large-bodied terrestrial animals, which possess harder keratin, bone, or muscle. Instead, the fine, often polished structure is consistent with an animal that spent its time plunging into water and handling softer, hydrodynamically efficient prey. Consider the physics of the cinematic attack. The Pteranodon seizes a child and attempts to carry them off. This requires substantial grip strength, a jaw structure capable of piercing or crushing bone and sinew, and a body frame robust enough to absorb the impact of a struggling load, far heavier than a mere fish. The fossilized structure, however, strongly suggests a significant specialization toward a pelagic lifestyle, a delicate instrument, finely tuned for a specific function, not an all-purpose weapon of mayhem. To use this specialized, hollow-boned jaw apparatus to crush a human limb would be akin to using a fishing rod as a bludgeon. The tool would break long before the task was accomplished. The cinematic depiction, therefore, is not merely an exaggeration of aggression. It is a fundamental misinterpretation of the creature's anatomical limitations. The creature that terrorizes the survivors is a fantasy, a composite monster stitched together from the true animal's silhouette and the terrifying ferocity of a fictional raptor. The reality is that the Pteranodon had already specialized itself out of the high-impacty, generalized violence necessary to perpetuate its film reputation. This dissonance immediately and suspensefully introduces the central conflict of our project: the gulf between the mesmerizing, terrifying cinematic illusion and the complex, ecologically constrained reality of the prehistoric animal. The conflict we uncovered in the Pteranodon's jaw structure, the specialist tool mistaken for a blunt weapon, is merely the opening chapter to a larger biological story. To truly understand why the cinematic sky demon is a flawed concept, we must shift our focus from the point of attack to the engine of the entire animal, its incredible, yet severely constraining, flight apparatus. This takes us directly into the heart of the scientific discovery that defines pterosaurian existence: the uncompromising law of the energetic imperative. For an animal the size of Pteranodon, with a wingspan that could stretch from 18 to 23 feet, rivaling the largest modern birds and yet possessing a significantly different skeletal architecture, every movement was an exercise in extreme aerodynamic and metabolic efficiency. The scientific anchor of pterosaur flight biomechanics and high-energy costs dictates that this animal simply could not afford the reckless, generalized violence depicted in the film. Let us consider the essential blueprint of a Pteranodon. Its skeleton was extensively pneumaticized hollow, filled with air sacs connected to its respiratory system. This was the ultimate weight reduction strategy. Designed to make its immense wingspan viable, its sternum, or breastbone, was deep and keeled, providing a massive anchor point for the powerful flight muscles that had to lift and sustain hundreds of pounds of bone, tissue, and wing membrane. These were magnificent flying machines, but they were machines running on an intensely strict energetic budget. The act of flight itself is metabolically expensive, but the act of takeoff for a creature of this size is astronomically costly. Pterosaurs, unlike most modern birds, are believed to have used a unique quadrupedal launch, pushing off with all four limbs simultaneously from a standing start. This explosive, full-body maneuver required a colossal surge of power. The cinematic monster, swooping low, crash-landing onto a structure, grappling, and then launching again repeatedly, is performing the most energetically wasteful series of actions imaginable. For the real Pteranodon, the entire strategy of its life would have revolved around minimizing these expensive maneuvers. Their massive wings were likely optimized for dynamic soaring and slope soaring over the ocean using wind gradients and thermal updrafts to sustain flight with minimal flapping. Essentially flying for free, they were the pelagic equivalent of the albatross, masters of economical cruising over the vast Kansas Seaway, where they predominantly lived. This economic reality makes the film's portrayal of high-risk terrestrial confrontation utterly nonsensical. Imagine a commercial airliner that could carry its fuel for only a limited time, choosing to execute repeated high-G landing and takeoff cycles just to pick fights with squirrels on the runway. The Pteranodon had a singular, critical energetic goal: find and consume enough fish to compensate for the cost of flying. Any deviation from that goal, any sustained fight on land, any unnecessary vertical ascent was a subtraction from its survival time. The ferocious aggression we witness on screen is not just a personality quirk, it is an ecological disaster. A real Pteranodon encountering humans or another large, struggling meal on land would have evaluated the risk-to-reward ratio instantly and brutally. The reward a risky, large carcass would not outweigh the enormous costs of landing, fighting, potential injury, and the subsequent high-cost takeoff, the chance of damaging their fragile, high-performance bones or their vital wing membrane. The patagium would have represented a death sentence for an aerial specialist. In that context, the scientific discovery is that the Pteranodon was not aggressively territorial in the way the film suggests. It was simply terrifyingly constrained by physics. It was a creature compelled toward efficiency. Furthermore, we must address the issue of terrestrial locomotion. When the cinematic creatures land, they run and stalk with unexpected speed and agility, while modern research has painted a picture of pterosaurs as competent quadrupeds, not the clumsy, dragging creatures of older depictions. Their primary stance was optimized for launch and stability, not for the kind of prolonged, agile pursuit required to fight a human inside a confined space. Their gait, essentially walking on the knuckles of their elongated fourth-wing fingers, positioned the center of mass high on land. They would have been awkward, exposed, and vulnerable to every large terrestrial predator inhabiting the coastal regions. The Pteranodon would have been keenly aware of its own physical limitations when removed from the medium of air. Its imperative was not to fight, but to escape to the refuge of the sky or the open water. The suspense of the film scene derives from the creature's overwhelming physical dominance. But the investigative science reveals a different, equally suspenseful truth. The real Pteranodon lived in a constant state of energetic vulnerability. Its sleek, aerodynamic form was achieved at the cost of structural robustness. Its power was channeled almost entirely into flight, leaving little reserve for terrestrial conflict. The monster of the silver screen is a predator given endless, impossible energy. The true Pteranodon was a specialist that, when faced with unexpected land conflict, would likely prioritize immediate, low-cost retreat over high-stakes, violent engagement. It was not a sky tyrant, but a magnificent prisoner of its own specialized anatomy and unforgiving metabolism. This analysis, rooted in the biomechanics of flight, entirely dismantles the pop culture myth of the aerial aggressor. We now know what the Pteranodon could not afford to do, leading us to the final question. What was this animal truly doing with its magnificent life? The answer lies far from the cages and canyons of the film. We have established the compelling case against the film's vicious sky demon. Its delicate fish-trap jaws were unsuited for crushing, and its unforgiving energetic budget made terrestrial conflict a near-lethal gamble. If the Pteranodon was so perfectly specialized for aerial economy, where did it spend its life? The final and most definitive answer is provided not by anatomy or biomechanics alone, but by the silent, unimpeachable testimony of geology, taphonomy. Taphonomy is the study of how organisms pass from the biosphere to the lithosphere, how they die, decay, and ultimately become fossils. It is the forensic science of the ancient world. The scientific anchor of the taphonomy of Pteranodon fossil paints a vivid and conclusive picture of its ecology. The vast majority of Pteranodon skeletons, those magnificent, large specimens that give us the measure of the beast, are recovered from the deep marine sediments of the Niobrara Formation in what was once the Western Interior Seaway of North America. These fossils are found alongside purely pelagic creatures, ammonites, ancient bony fish like Xiphactinus, and marine reptiles. Crucially, they are found far from the coastal terrestrial environments and their large predator populations. This geographic and geological context is not circumstantial. It is the overwhelming signal of a specialized lifestyle. The Pteranodon was not a creature of the forest edge or the inland swamp. It was a creature of the open ocean, a true pelagic sentinel. This specialization explains the paradoxical combination of massive size and structural fragility. The animal needed its enormous wingspan to maximize gliding efficiency over the featureless, wind-swept surface of the sea, allowing it to cover vast distances to find patchy fish schools. Its fragile, hollow bones were an essential engineering compromise to make that huge-size airborne. This animal was not designed to terrorize. It was designed to endure the demanding logistics of marine foraging. Its aggression was focused not on fighting a rival on a clifftop, but on efficiently catching a slippery fish and defending its own catch from fellow oceanic flyers. When we synthesize our evidence, the true nature of the animal emerges. we are left not with a monster defined by its irrational rage, but with a magnificent, highly sophisticated biological machine defined by its constraint. The Pteranodon was a victim of its own success. Its superlative adaptation to pelagic life meant it was, by necessity, a weakling on land. It was a predator, yes, but its terrifying presence was confined to its own element, where it ruled the waves of the ancient seaway. The lasting power of the cinematic depiction lies in its accessibility. It takes a fascinating, but perhaps ecologically complex animal and transforms it into an easily understood archetypal villain. The Flying Menace, this pop culture myth, served a powerful narrative purpose by creating instantaneous dread. It allowed the filmmakers to tap into our primal fear of attack from above, a fear ingrained from our primate ancestors. Yet, by moving beyond that primal fear, the scientific discovery offers us a more resonant, deeper kind of awe. The animal that could glide for hundreds of miles on the breath of the wind. That perfectly balanced the physics of flight with the scarcity of its oceanic prey, is ultimately a more spectacular creation than the simplified monster of the screen. The suspense inherent in its real life is not the question of whether it will attack the protagonist, but the constant, breathtaking tightrope walk between flight and falling, between sustenance and starvation, that defined its existence every single day. Our investigation concludes that the vicious sky demon of cinema is a brilliant piece of cinematic illusion, an exercise in dramatic license that skillfully weaponized the creature's silhouette. But the true Pteranodon, a vast, silent, economical master of the Cretaceous skies, bound to the tyranny of the deep ocean, remains a far more wondrous, complex, and scientifically majestic entity. We close our investigation with a reflection on the dual heritage of this astonishing creature. Cinema provided the initial hook, framing the Pteranodon as an antagonist in a thrilling drama of survival. But the dedicated work of science, fueled by the evidence of fragile bone and geological location, peels back the layers of fiction to reveal an animal whose true story, a story of elegant biomechanics and uncompromising energetic constraint, is the most inspiring narrative of all.